All right, let's take a look at a few of the problems from yesterday. So here we're solving basic equations with addition or subtraction, and we're starting with set 1 here. So it gives us the examples in problems 1 and 2, and the most important thing is that we show the steps for solving. And so of course we want to isolate the variable, meaning we want to get x by itself. And in order to do that, we're going to have to do the opposite of whatever it's paired with. Meaning if we're adding 5 to x, we're going to subtract 5. That way we get just x on the left side of the equation. And then of course what you do to one side of the equation you have to do to the other, and so that's how we end up with 11 on the right side. Now notice, since we have x all by itself, meaning that there's no other operation like addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division paired with it, that means that we have solved what x is. And so you can actually take this 11 and plug it right back in for x in the equation. And you'll notice it then reads as 11 plus 5 equals 16. And since that is in fact true, we can go ahead and say yes, we solved problem 1 correctly and we showed our work. And we see it again here in problem 2. We see that x is paired with minus 8. And to get rid of minus 8, you're going to do the opposite of that, which is add 8. And so when we do that to both sides, we're going to get x equals 20. Now, in terms of why we want to add that 8 so we can cross off that minus 8, we're trying to isolate the variable. And why we want to do that is because we're trying to figure out what x is, right? That's the whole point of trying to solve this equation. Figure out what that missing number is. And so to get x by itself, we just have to undo whatever it tells us. So if we're subtracting 8 from it, in other words, I owe $8, I need to add 8 or get $8 back. So that way I'm left with just x. So let's go ahead and work on a few more of these problems that you guys completed yesterday. So here we've got x minus 10 equals 4. So again, I have x paired with minus 10. So I'm going to do the opposite of subtraction, the inverse it's referred to as, and add 10 to both sides. Because it's just like a scale. What I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other. Well, that means that minus 10 and adding 10 is going to cancel out, and I'm left with just x over here. So now I have x equals 4 plus 10. Well, instead of writing 4 plus 10, I'm instead just going to do 4 plus 10, and that's going to give me 14. I can plug in 14 for x, and that makes sense. 14 minus 10 equals 4. Now here's where it gets a little tricky. When I have 3 plus x equals 18, I can think about, okay, if I need to get this plus 3 gone, I can just subtract 3. So if I do that, it's going to give me x equals 15. But then there's other occasions where it gets a little bit trickier, and we'll see it here on problem 10. When we're subtracting by x, you'll notice that if you were to subtract 25 here from both sides, you end up with negative x equals negative, let's see, in this case, 14. And then I have these two negatives. Now, one thing you could do is try to get rid of that negative by dividing or multiplying by a negative. Meaning I could divide negative x by negative 1, for example, on both sides. Or I could multiply both sides by negative 1. Because remember, when I do a negative times a negative, it in turn gives me a positive. Just like over here, negative 14 times negative 1 is going to give me positive 14. Now, an easier way to get around this and still solve the equation properly is to instead add x to both sides. So I'm going to start off by actually adding x. It's the only occasion where you would want to start off by adding your variable instead of subtracting or adding the other number. And so here when we add x to both sides, you'll notice that we end up with positive numbers still. And we have 25 still on this side equals 11 plus x, or x plus 11, however you'd like to write it. And from this point, if we're trying to get x by itself, we can subtract 11 from both sides, right? Because we want to isolate that positive variable. And now over here, we have 14, and on this side, 11 minus 11, well, that gives me 0, so I can just cancel it out. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to write 0 here because 0 plus x is the same thing as simply just 0, or x, excuse me. And we know that because let's say x equals 5. Well, 0 plus 5 is going to just equal 5. So in other words, x would just equal x, whether adding by 0 or just having it by itself. So we have 14 equals x as our final answer because we started off by adding x to both sides to keep things positive. All right, just like your mindset, you want to keep it positive.